Oh boy, mom and dad are fighting again. If you haven't caught up, Vercel and Cloudflare have had quite a beef for a while now. Usually this beef's around things like performance or DDoS protection or marketing mumbo jumbo or just the teams getting mad at each other on Twitter. But this one's a bit different because this one's about Bash. It's just Bash. You might think I'm making a joke here, and to be fair, I kind of am. What we're talking about is the Just Bash package, a really cool package that the CTO of Vercel built that has been honestly really interesting. I've been recommending this package to a bunch of people. I've even played with it a bit myself because it is what it sounds like. It's just Bash. Not as in like a thing you run in a terminal Bash, but an emulation of Bash fully in TypeScript, because it turns out agents do a really good job of working with Bash, but giving each agent its own actual virtual instance that it can call Bash in is a little bit too expensive. But if you can create a virtual Bash system where the agents can explore code bases and do things all within a JavaScript VM instead of a Linux VM, you can do a lot with that, which is why Malta built Just Bash. It's a virtual Bash environment with in-memory file system written in TypeScript and designed for AI agents. It's so cool that Sunil Pai, aka 3.1, one of the original React team members that now works on all things durable objects and also agents over at Cloudflare, tweeted earlier this month, "Okay, at Malta, you cooked with Just Bash. It's very good." This is foreshadowing to what just happened. Malta posted an article on Sunday morning. Cloudflare forked Just Bash, and they really should not have. Oh boy. This is not the first time Cloudflare made a fork that pissed off Vercel. I didn't do a video on it, but there was a big drama just a few weeks ago because Cloudflare forked Next.js and rebuilt it on top of Vite in Vinext, which passed a lot of the tests and was cool they got it that far, but also had a bunch of massive security issues that affected real users. You have benefits and negatives to these types of bold forks. And I understand why Vercel was scared here. They thought this might be another one of those. But there's layers to this one, as there always is. I can't wait to go into all of this back and forth, why Vercel is so salty, and where things are going. But as y'all know, these are two companies that are not paying me for this coverage, and if I'm going to say I'm biased, we're going to have to take a sponsor from someone else. Yes, this is the sponsor cut. It's 2026, and today's sponsor is still trying to make fetch happen. Hear me out, because Browserbase is awesome. They're one of the best ways to give your agents and your code in general access to the actual web via actual browsers that can source and use actual websites. This is incredible for when you want to interact with the web in particular, but it's not necessary if you're just trying to get data out of a page, as long as the page can be rendered in a traditional way. But as soon as things get more complex, especially in the single page app world, the likelihood that you can turn a URL into the content that you're actually trying to get goes down meaningfully. Unless you use Browserbase's newest feature, the Fetch API. Yes, they built their own fetch that lets you get content from a web page that is the actual content of the page. It couldn't be simpler. You make a post request to their API for fetch, give them a key, hand over the URL that you want to get the content from, and it will just respond with that content. That's it. And if you're looking at this and thinking, well, I can just curl the page myself, you can sometimes. As they say, there's all sorts of problems for modern websites that make this complex. Redirects, inconsistent encodings, unusual headers, SPAs, all of these types of things make it really hard to actually get the content out of a page. And now it's trivial. And if you want to do anything more with that page, like navigate it, click buttons on it, sign into it, all of those types of things and more, Browserbase has you covered for that too. Give your agents the whole web at soydev.link/browserbase. Let's dive into what Malta has to say. Ignore this because this happened afterwards. We're starting here. My colleague noticed yesterday that Cloudflare forked Just Bash and published it as @Cloudflare/shell. Now, this is completely in their rights to do. Just Bash is published under Apache 2.0, and everybody can do with the source as they please, under the permissive license. That said, it is worth having a conversation as to whether you should fork an open source project and when you should not. I think there's something like open source etiquette and community spirit, where forks are kind of a last resort. The reason is simple. It's better to make the shared thing better than it is to get just your changes into some fork. As far as I know, there has been no attempt by Cloudflare to contribute to Just Bash, and I'm the sole maintainer, so I should know, I being Malta in this case. On top of this, projects are in different states. If I have a super stable, half-abandoned project, then a fork can be very sustainable. I do the changes I need, and few changes from upstream are ever expected to need to land in my fork. This is a very good point. If there's something that isn't well maintained and you fork to maintain it better, expected, totally fine. Don't fork things before they are stable. This is where it comes to why forking Just Bash is such a bad idea at this stage. Just Bash is not one of these stable, half-abandoned projects. It's new, it's under heavy development, and to some extent, it's exploring the frontier of the category of sandbox-ish thing for agents. The security model is evolving, and the codebase has to evolve accordingly. I know this seems small, but if you're worried about this article being AI-generated slop, typos that prove it's not. The codebase has to evolve, not as to evolve. Written by hand for sure. Cloudflare's fork removed the disclaimer that this is a beta project, and it removed several references in the README for optional features that present additional security surface. That's actually pretty bad. Removing the disclaimer that it's a beta in the README is a bit... don't love that. But there's more layers here, don't worry. This is particularly egregious because Cloudflare replaced the Python 3 implementation with one that will immediately get you owned. They document to use Pyodide, which by default allows the Python program full access to the JS host environment. That's bad. Just Bash used to use Pyodide, but it tried to use it in a secure way. Cloudflare removed the security relevant code entirely. Additionally, Just Bash migrated away because Pyodide really can't be made secure under Just Bash's threat model, but this likely happened after the fork. Again, don't fork early projects. Defense in-depth layers got removed. More security stuff. This seems to be Vercel's angle recently, is Cloudflare is doing things that are comparable, but they're so insecure. Historically, Cloudflare's whole angle has been the DDoS protection layer that is easy to add to your projects, and that's been their go-to-market, is the secure option. But yeah, Vercel's trying to win that wedge now, especially on the DDoS side, but also more in general. And because of the security issues that existed in Vinext, their vNext fork thing, they are leaning heavily into these now. It is also worth noting, as chat pointed out, the reason they're using Pyodide is that it's the only thing that has gotten working properly in Cloudflare Worker Python environments. Because Cloudflare Workers aren't real node, they're not running on real dedicated Linux boxes per request the way that things work on something like Vercel. I've talked about this a bunch in other comparison videos. The TLDR is that Vercel runs a layer lower where every developer is deploying what is effectively a Docker image that happens to run Node in it. Where on Cloudflare, you have V8, the JavaScript runtime, that is split apart into different isolates, which is where your code is put and executed. So you can't really control the image that your code is running on. You're just controlling the code that gets thrown into that sandbox. And that sandbox can use WASM stuff, so it can use Python in certain specific ways. And the idea of the fake bash environment that is provided by Just Bash being able to execute things like Python safely is a challenge. And the way that Vercel splits these things up is very different from the way that Cloudflare thinks about them, using the isolates as that security layer. So I would bet that the security layer with Pyodide is probably fine-ish in the Cloudflare model, but doesn't make sense in Vercel's. That is my guess. There's a big twist near the end of all this, so make sure you stick through for that. I promise it'll be worth it, at least a little bit. As he says here, security's been a huge focus for them. Just Bash has several defense in-depth layers that introduce additional defenses against host breakouts. The host breakout problem is very real with these things. If the model can get out of this fake bash environment and execute real code on your system, the Just Bash model collapses immediately. Apparently, Cloudflare either forked before they got introduced, or they simply deleted them. For example, Just Bash has defense in-depth box, which deactivates eval, the function constructor, and other ways to eval code in JS while Just Bash is executing. Cloudflare's own worker system does not need this part, but they advertise as cross-platform in Node.js and Dino both very much need this. This is the important piece. Cloudflare's worker system does not need these abstractions for keeping things safe because Cloudflare's already built this into the runtime itself, but Node.js and Dino absolutely need this type of security built in. Additionally, this also provides access to global objects that may leak secrets, WASM, and other dangerous APIs, which are very much available in workers. Again, it's all just gone. Just Bash also ships with deep checks that prevent code patterns which are prone to prototype pollution, which is the most worrying vector for host escape. Oh no, is the rest of the article gone? What happened here? The edit might have broken the end of this. I'm not actually sure. We'll assume that that's the whole thing. And now we have to read Guillermo's response to it. Cloudflare's mission is to fork the entire developer ecosystem and destroy open source. Vinext was an excuse to swindle developers into using their proprietary runtimes instead of Node. It shipped with 10 vulnerabilities that they cheerfully handed to a .gov website. Now they've done it again. They can't run just bash because open source software that runs on Node, it has to work at the edge, which is a thing no one wants. We learned this the hard way. Not even Node core devs that they hired to work on workers instead want it. Not really a sentence, but here's where we're going to dig into some things. Also worth noting that their runtime is open source. It isn't Node, but it is an alternative to Node that makes sense for the types of things that Cloudflare does. But this is the part that we need to talk about. Cloudflare can't run just bash because it's open source software that runs on Node. This is key. It has to work at the edge. Let's break this down. Vercel versus Cloudflare, just bash edition. Your system has layers. There's a lot of layers here like boot, driver, all of this, but I'm going to be really intentionally simple with this. You have your OS, so it could be Linux, it could be something else, whatever. You know what an operating system is. You have your shell, and again, I'm being very simple with this. You have your runtime, which runs above the shell, and then you have dev code, which is the code that the developer writes. And maybe in some cases, you also have user code. Maybe this is code that was generated by an LLM. Maybe this is code the user wrote they want to run on your server. This can be a lot of different things. The reason I'm drawing all of this out is I want to talk about how the layers are split in these different platforms. Let's talk about building on traditional AWS servers. If you're building on AWS, your OS, probably Linux. Your shell's probably bash. Your runtime depends on what you're doing, but there's a good chance your runtime is Node.js, especially if you're here. Hi, Node devs. I know a lot of y'all are in my audience. Then your dev code, this could be, I don't know, let's just say you're using Next.js or something like that. And the user code is some vibe slop that the user is generating in your app. This is an example of a real stack somebody could do. The Docker image has Linux configured. It has Node.js there. It installs a bunch of packages like Next.js and then downloads your code onto it. And then it can run and execute in the cloud. But you own effectively the whole stack here when you build that way. Let's now take a look at doing this all on Vercel. I'm going to copy paste because not too much has to change here. The reason it doesn't change much is because on Vercel, you're spinning up real Docker images for the requests that your users are sending in. They are smart enough that they're not spinning up one image per request like Lambda does by default. They're not spinning these things up in a cluster that can process multiple requests from multiple people at the same time, but this is running on a real server, which means if you want to do something like let an agent execute bash, we don't want something up here executing all the way down here, because that lets you do a lot of dangerous stuff. This lets you access environment variables. This lets you break out of the current request and get to other user requests. This lets you sniff things you shouldn't. This lets you control the database connection. If you're able to, from this slop layer at the top, get through Next.js, and then worse off, get through Node down to the native shell, you can do a lot of dangerous stuff. And the thing about how Node works is you can just do that. You can just exec in Node. It is possible to just call things from the native shell in Node. And that's awesome. It's one of the things that makes Node so powerful. It is just JavaScript on the server. Obviously, does a lot more than that, but from a Node service, I can access things on the machine. With Node, you can call file system commands. You can execute basically any command. You can kill processes on the machine. You can connect to databases. You can do all sorts of things in Node that require you go below Node. And this is the point I want to emphasize when we're talking about just bash, because if your vibe coding tools are running agents that need bash to understand a code base or make changes or do things, those should not be going into the native bash shell, because then they can screw with other people's stuff on your server. The reason Vercel created just bash is so they could put a fake bash layer all the way up here. They built their own pseudo bash that, as far as the agents are concerned, is the exact same thing, but allows for this user code to stop here and not have to go any deeper or into any riskier places. By putting this here, they have reduced the risk of things downstream. But they did that by building a lot of things in here at the node level to keep it from being able to go further. So I know I drew the line there. The line's actually closer to here, where they're building this on top of Node. And as long as they built it properly, this will keep the agent from breaking through and going deeper. And now we need to talk about how Cloudflare does things, because it is meaningfully different. So with Cloudflare, they're still doing a lot of this the same. I'm sure they're still running Linux under the hood. I'm sure they still got Bash or something running there. But instead of Node, it's Workerd, which is a V8-based runtime that splits up requests into their own isolates. So for a given request coming in on Vercel, all of this is affecting just that user's request, or on your service, all of the dev code is on top of your instance. Where things get weird with Cloudflare is the way that this is all split up, where effectively the bottom is shared. So the runtime, the shell, and the OS, these are all parts that are the same across lots of different developers' code at the same time. And the abstraction is higher up, where we have different instances of developer and user code running all on the same instance in Cloudflare. Hopefully this helps describe the difference, where each request coming in on Cloudflare spins up its own isolate that will pour your code in. But different devs have different code that's running in the same runtime instance on Cloudflare. So again, to compare with Vercel, the difference is where this abstraction happens. Still Node.js, but all of these requests are going to be running on top of the same code in the same instance of your code, but the user requests are going to be handled a layer above. So the question here is, where is the isolation? How do I make sure user 1 can't access something from user 2's request? On Cloudflare, the box is cut a little bit deeper in this regard, where user code 1 can't access anything across the barrier because this barrier is built into the runtime itself, and every request is happening in its own isolate. This also means it has to load the code every time a request comes in and respond to it accordingly. They've made this so fast that you barely even notice, but the isolation happens higher up. But the isolation happens, in this case, I guess, a little bit lower. The difference is that every instance of dev code on Vercel has its own Linux shell it's built on top of. So when you deploy and I deploy on Vercel, our code is running on different Linux instances. When you and I deploy on Cloudflare, not only are we in the same Linux instance, we're actually in the same JavaScript runtime with isolates for each different request. So why are we so deep in how Vercel and Cloudflare work? Because we're here to talk about this pseudo bash layer. Does the reason this exists make more sense when we split things up this way? When we want to make sure that user request 1 can't affect a different user's request or do things it shouldn't be able to, that we can't go horizontally into other requests or vertically into the deeper things we shouldn't have access to. On Cloudflare, this is a lot less necessary because, again, we don't have really any ability to break out of workerd. This is a much more minimal runtime. Workerd can't spawn processes. It can't read files. It can't do things on your system the same way Node can, because workerd is not just built to be JavaScript that can do everything on your computer. Workerd is meant to be an easy way to do worker-style isolates at scale in the cloud. It's really cool stuff, but it doesn't work for this because the workerd instance doesn't have access to bash. You can't write a bash command in your code on Cloudflare and then execute it. It's trivial for me to go write whatever bash I want and execute it on Vercel. Hell, Bad Cops built a framework in bash that I'm almost positive you're able to host on Vercel. That would just straight up not work on Cloudflare because of where the abstraction is and where your code lives, and more importantly, what your code can do. The reason just bash was valuable for Vercel isn't because you couldn't use bash on Vercel. You could. The problem was that if you were using bash on Vercel, you were doing it below the node runtime, which is a huge potential security risk and also a potential performance issue if you want to do a lot of this at scale. Just bash was built to move the bash layer above the runtime so that it's easier to do things safely and in parallel for the types of experiences we're all building. But what's even more interesting is why it's useful to Cloudflare. You might be thinking, well, Cloudflare has this isolation. Why do you need to do that? Well, the reason that Sunil is so excited is because of the thing I mentioned before. It's because you can't run bash on Cloudflare otherwise. So Vercel's reason for building just bash is because it would be unsafe to give the agents access to real bash in a stack like this. The reason it's exciting to Cloudflare is all of a sudden, bash is now a thing that you can do inside of Cloudflare where you couldn't before. So they have very different incentives for doing this and very different reasons for caring about this. Again, Vercel built this to make it more secure and also more performant to let agents do things with bash in their environment and also any other node environment, because this is the case for pretty much anywhere you're running node. Cloudflare can't do a lot of things because they're not running Node. They can't run a lot of packages because it's not Node. And more importantly, because the size of the code you can deploy on Cloudflare is relatively limited. So Cloudflare can't use bash for entirely different reasons. So just bash is very exciting to them. The idea of simulating bash in TypeScript so that your agents can use it without actually having it is actually really cool and exciting. And there's a reason why Sunil was so hyped. I am sure he was genuinely pumped when he saw it and started playing with it. This was 2 weeks ago. So what the hell happened? Why is everyone so upset? I think Guillermo correctly explained why he is upset here. He perceives any action by Cloudflare to be an attempt to fork the entire web, and I get why he's upset because the Vinex thing was not handled great. He should be upset about that. But now they have the bad taste in their mouth and they're freaking out over things nonsensically. Did he just delete the post as I was filming? God, I need you guys to take a moment to appreciate that's how deep we are. Like, this is the craziest fucking drama every day. I guarantee if I check, I have at least one text from Dane, and I probably have one coming from Guillermo. 2 texts from Dane, nothing from Guillermo yet. I'm sure it's coming. But yes, the CTO of Cloudflare has already texted me about this. Surprise. I won't say what. I'm not going to leak my journalistic integrity or do anything wrong there, but amusing regardless. You know these people well at a point. I need to do what I'm actually here to do, though, which is defend the fuck out of Sunil because I love this man so much. Sunil's a good friend. I am very lucky to have him as a mentor and a point of contact so many times throughout my chaotic career in software dev. I love Sunil deeply, and I think this is a huge misunderstanding about a thing he did out of genuine appreciation for what Vercel cooked with Just Bash. I'm not even going to read his message yet. I'm just going to assume what happened here. Just Bash is built because Vercel has the use case I described. Sunil sees it and says, oh yeah, we love that type of thing. If you're not already familiar, I covered this before. The code mode arc, where Cloudflare realized that if you turn MCPs into code and let the agents write code instead, your performance and experience with MCP would get meaningfully better. That's a Sunil thing. Sunil has been hunting for all these ways to take what agents do well naturally and hack it to make the experience better overall. And I'm assuming that this is the same mindset he came into with Just Bash. The code mode stuff made it so MCP was way better in general, but also way better on Cloudflare because you don't have to run and bind and do all the things MCP normally expects if you just have packages that handle that for you. I'm assuming he saw Just Bash and had a similar realization of, oh shit, this lets the agents work the way they are good at working, but potentially can do more with it. So obviously the next thing he wants is to throw this in durable objects and throw this in Cloudflare. And that's exactly what he did. He tweeted saying this was awesome. He kept thinking about it. He kept playing with it. He then decided he wanted to make it work for their use case of using it on Cloudflare. But again, the role of Just Bash was fundamentally different for Vercel than it is for Cloudflare. They don't need the security separations. They don't need all these other features. They just need the Bash emulation layer, effectively. That's the only part that really matters for them in their use case. And that's why they probably ripped all of those parts out, because they're just straight up unnecessary and probably incompatible with Workerd, because a lot of those security layers were built for and around Node.js. Since they're not using Node, those things aren't necessary and also aren't compatible, so it makes sense they would gut as many of them as possible. So what this actually was a side project by Sunil, just desperately trying to make this work because he thought it was really cool and wanted to use it for things. But here's where the real mistake is. I don't know if he touches on it here or not. He didn't do this through his personal GitHub or on a private GitHub or in any way that made it clear this was them playing with it and looking into different solutions there. He just forked it on the Cloudflare GitHub, and I'm sure if I go to the Cloudflare GitHub, it's probably still there. The fork was folded into a pile of packages that exist in the Cloudflare agents mono repo. Yeah, this shell package is their attempt at forking Just Bash. Okay, that changes things a little bit. The angle I was going to go at has to be a bit different now. Let me think. Again, doing my best to best faith this one. This is what happens when an excited engineer sees how useful a piece of technology is and wants to apply it in the ecosystem they work in. In order to use this on Cloudflare, it would have to be a package that is accessible in those environments. And if you have ever published a package on NPM, you know how miserable it is to do in a way that is reproducible and easy to bump and update and use in different places. It's obnoxious enough that Sunil and a lot of other people at Cloudflare put time into building this mono repo for all their agent packages to make it easier to push new packages out, put changes to packages out, and make sure everything works and is cohesive in one place. So if you are Sunil, you see this package, this Just Bash package, you are really excited about it, you want to use it on Cloudflare, so you spin up a shell, you spin up an agent in the background, you tell it, hey, I want this to work with this runtime instead. Here's a giant mono repo that shows you all of the ways that this works. Add this package based on this other thing, make it work and tell me when it's done. Let it run in the background, take a look when it's done. It's like, oh shit, it made a new package at Cloudflare/shell. It's in the repo. It all seems to work. Cool. I'm going to just push this out for us to play with. And then a drama ensues. It is clear that Sunil did this in good faith, The issue is I don't think he's the one who did it. This piece up here should not have been edited the way it was, especially to have the early beta stuff removed. This looks like a normal package you would just go use and trust, and that is scary. That is a reason enough to be upset as Vercel in this instance. Just Bash is full of warnings when you go to it, making it very clear this is beta software. Use at your own risk. Please provide feedback. And a whole security model section where they go in depth on how they're thinking about security for it. Fork has none of that. While at the same time, the fork claims it runs anywhere. Cloudflare workers, Node.js, or the browser. But it removed a lot of the safeguards that are in the Node version on the original Just Bash. That's scary. I can totally understand why Vercel would see this and be upset. That they put this work into their package, built for Node.js specifically, and all of a sudden there's this fork that removes all of the safety stuff and all of the warnings for safety stuff, claims it runs everywhere, and most importantly, and this sounds silly, the name is @cloudflare/shell. So if you find this on NPM, you install it, you try it, everything seems hunky-dory and totally fine. You might even try this over Just Bash, because Just Bash is this early thing that's not safe and only works in Node and Vercel. Cloudflare shell works everywhere. It doesn't have the safety warnings. It's probably totally good. But that's just because of the things they deleted, not because of things they added. And that perception is a real problem that Vercel now has to deal with. And that does suck. That is not within the spirit of open source. But that's also not what the intent was either. What happened here was Sunil, as shown before, was excited and wanted to go try the thing. Even Dane's in the replies here at the start of the month saying he's using Just Bash from Malta at Vercel for his own internal CTO agent. They genuinely liked this product. And he said as much here in his reply to the now deleted article. Oh God, I was going to reach out to you on Monday after the weekend. I was really just experimenting here myself. I really should have added an experimental label or whatever. My plan was to play with it a bit and then come back to chat with you about adding hooks. Maybe I should have done it on my personal account, or maybe I set up the npm publish pipeline too early. I'm sorry. I really thought I'd come proper prepared and tested before chatting with you. Yeah, it was fully vibed while I was chilling in Spain. Called it. I knew it was a vibe coded thing. I just didn't want to open up an issue saying, hey, please do this for Cloudflare without actually trying out a bunch of things and showing you proof or examples. I even tried to make sure what I'd done would stay platform agnostic. Sorry, it looks the way it did. This is genuinely sad. Like, as a person who's friends of all these people, this is just sad. We're at that point now. The salt from the Liberation Day, which is what they referred to the Vite Next.js thing as. Yeah, they had a call. They're all good now. So I'm not covering this drama as it's developing. I'm covering this at the end. When bad faith is assumed, bad things will prevail. And that's the point we're at with this drama. Because there is so much bad faith assumption going in at all times across all of these conversations, especially with things like great engineers being poached and passed between the two companies, with forks happening, with weird posts, subtweets, and some of the really cringe shit the CEO of Cloudflare has tweeted as well. The conversation has eroded so much that everything is going to be interpreted in bad faith now. It sucks. I hate how this is eroded because Sunil is not the type of person who should be caught in the middle of something like this. He's a real, genuine builder that just wants to try out and ship cool shit. This started because he thought what Malta was working on was cool, and now it's a video on my YouTube channel, and now it's fucking content, when we could have just been talking about how cool these packages were. I hate that the first time I've been able to really talk about Just Bash, which I think is an awesome package, has to be stuck into a video about fucking drama. This is awful. I hate this. I know everybody thinks I love drama. I really, really don't. This is my least favorite shit. I hate that this keeps happening. I hate that this is holding us back from doing cool shit. That Malta's wasting time writing articles about how evil Cloudflare is instead of just fucking shipping. It's all stupid. Sunil made small mistakes here. He should have put this on his personal GitHub or made it way clearer what it was. Because when you're a developer, you look at the README, you look at NPM, and you look at what it does, and you assume that's the truth. Agents have made that less true. I don't know about y'all. I'm not out here writing my READMEs the same way I used to. I try to. I go through and trim it down and make it cleaner as where I can. But when you're letting these agents run in the background, what's left for context is not necessarily the right information, which allows for things to be misread, misinterpreted, and explode. And I understand how Sunil got in this position. I probably would have done very similar here. But this sucks. This is just dumb. I wish more good faith was assumed. I wish somebody like Malta would have looked at the commit history, saw it was his friend Sunil, and then reached out to him to talk about it before blowing it the fuck up. Everybody made small missteps here until Vercel made the huge misstep of going public instead of reaching out. And this is why I will always say the same thing about this stuff. Send the fucking DM first. I know y'all think I'm the biggest drama frog in the world, but I promise you guys, for every drama that I find myself within, there's 10 or more that I'm quietly behind the scenes sending the DMs to prevent from happening. This one should have been a DM. And instead, it's a huge drama. It's a deleted article. It's a thing I've gotten too many texts from too many people about, and is now going to have to be a video. I'm so tired. Very tired Theo from the future here. Malta posted this, and I thought it was worth including in the video before he went live. Reflecting on it all, I stirred up unnecessary pain for Sunil 3.1, and I regret it. He very much didn't deserve that, and the community didn't need it. He's one of the most welcoming, positive, uplifting people in the JS community. He's a great listener and someone who leaves every room better than he found it. And he's always team web rather than team company. I'm sorry, Sunil. I absolutely agree with the sentiment. I am pumped to see Malta reflecting, recognizing his mistakes, calling out the fact that he regrets it, and most importantly, highlighting just how great a person Sunil is. It still breaks my heart that Sunil, of all people, was caught up in this. He requested a donation to the British Heart Foundation. I think that's in good taste, and I'll be going to donate now. Sorry for the jarring tone shift. I just thought it was important to include how this all wrapped up, because this is a big drama, and these companies matter a lot for the future of the web, and knowing that they're in good hands is important. So I'm very thankful to see Malta coming out and owning this the way that he did. To Vercel and to Cloudflare, to my friends working at both that are involved in all of these things, please just try to assume a bit more good faith. You all have each other's phone numbers. I've seen the texts y'all send. Just talk to each other, and not like combatants, like humans, because we all are humans, and we all are trying to make the web better. Just assume such before you go apeshit. Send the text first, and then you don't have to end up with a drama like this where everybody just looks kind of shitty, especially Vercel in this instance. I'm tired, and I'm sure y'all are too, so please just try a little bit harder. I'm not asking for a lot here. Just send a text before a shitpost. It's not that hard. Take it from somebody who's made this mistake a lot of times. That's all I got to say on this one, and until next time, peace nerds.